So, hello and welcome to the next episode of the Sports News Blitz podcast, which is brought to you by the Sports News Blitz website. Today, I'm joined with a special host. Sam is not available today. I'm joined with K-Ci. Hello, K-Ci.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Thank you very much for joining us. And today, we've got an incredibly special guest with us who Notts County fans will know and love across Nottinghamshire. It's the one and only Mr. Charlie Slater. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the very generous intro as well.
Of course, nothing less. So, Charlie, I don't know if you've seen, but our first episode we did with Five Live's John Murray.
I know, a tough act to follow that. Yeah, thanks for that. That's a tough act to follow.
Oh, it was absolutely brilliant sport. And at the beginning, we wanted to ask him a couple of questions just so we can get to know you a little bit better, and those who might listen can get to know you a little bit better as well. So, just off the bat, I would like to know what your favourite film is, Charlie.
Godfather. Second one, not number 3.
Godfather.
I would go for The Godfather, and as a close second, American Gangster. But only the bits with Denzel Washington in. I think the bits with Russell Crowe a little bit. So I just skipped to the Denzel bits.
Oh, wow. Okay. I feel like you'd rehearsed that. That came straight off the bat.
I've often thought, like, because you watch these podcasts and things like that, and I've heard people not that I'm saying your questions aren't original, but I've heard people be asked, what's your favorite film and things like that. So I've always thought, what is my favorite film? So yeah, those two. I could go for others and kind of pollute the water on it all and start telling you Space Jam 1 and things like that, but we'll stick to the first two because they're far more impressive than Space Jam.
Oh, lovely stuff. I mean, I think we had Casablanca from John Murray, so we've got a broad range of bits and bobs here. K-Ci, since you're new to the podcast as well, my friend, I feel like it's only right we ask you the same thing.
Oh, you know what? I'm not a massive film watcher. I'm not going to lie to you, but there's one that I watch if I need to laugh, and it's Ted. And I know that sounds like basic, but it is probably the one that I watch the most, mate. So I'm going to have to say that. And to be honest, it could be either of them because I find all of them hilarious.
No, I think that's a very respectable choice. It's a very good comedy. Mark Wahlberg, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Very good actor.
Matthew, what's yours?
Oh, I've no Back to the Future.
Ah, okay.
By a mile, no questions asked.
I've never seen
that one. Has also been prepared. Have you not seen Back to the Future?
I know. My wife says this to me all the time. She's like, "How have you never seen that?" And I say to her, "How have you never seen The Godfather?"
It's a very fair point. I haven't seen The Godfather, so
mate, watch The Godfather. It's great. Oh, I teach you a lot.
I feel like Back to the Future, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, Back to the Future is probably more your generation than it is mine.
Yeah, it probably is. No,
it came out in 85.
Yeah, I wasn't born then. I'm not that old. No, I wasn't born quite yet. So it was still a little bit before mine. My generation was more like Three Ninjas, Knuckle Up and things like that, which you'll have never heard of. But trust me, Three Ninjas, Knuckle Up was top tier sort of film when I was about 7 years old.
Okay, I'll put them down on the to watch list. And also, we'd like to know your favourite song. If there's a song you do before a match, before a report, is there anything that kind of gets you in the mood, gets you going a bit?
No, I mean, like if I was going to do, like sometimes if I go and do a full commentary and I want to have my words coming to me like tick 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 tick, I'd listen to like some old Jay-Z Reasonable Doubt, or I might listen like more recently, like there was that Stormzy Mel Made Me Do It song, where I could be able to, like, I knew all the words to that and it would just help like loosen up my mouth a little bit. But my favorite song of all time would be a song which is long before any of us were born, is Sam Cooke, A Change Is Gonna Come.
Oh, I've never heard of it. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a great song. Like it's one of the all time like great songs. So yeah, Sam Cooke, Change Is Gonna Come.
Change is gonna come. Okay, K-Ci, and we'll flip it back to you.
See, it's hard because I don't know if I could put a finger on one. At the minute, I am massive on that $1 Million Baby song. I feel like that's on my repeat. I'm playing. If I go on my playlist, that's the first one I'm playing. But all time, see, I'm not really into the classics, so I don't really have a answer just off the top of my head, mate. So I don't know if I could give you one, but I love music. Just full stop. I don't think a life without music would be boring. I think that's my answer.
No, I think that's incredibly fair. And in tradition, I'll go back round to mine. It's Huey Lewis and the News. Power of Love is my all-time favourite song.
So tune to
Before, it's a brilliant song. Anyway, I think that's the introduction sort of out of the way. Thank you very much, both. So, Charlie, we're going to quickly kind of gloss over the Euros. You know, it's been a bit of a sad time for us as England fans. However, what were your thoughts on the tournament?
There's always that element of frustration, isn't there? Because you watch these players, these as individuals, but you watch them within their club team setups week in, week out, whether that be with, Jude Bellingham in La Liga, or Harry Kane scoring all those goals in the Bundesliga, or Phil Foden or Bukayo Saka or Declan Rice, or you can, go through the team and go, my goodness, this is an immense amount of talent. And I am old enough to remember the kind of the last so-called golden generation of Ferdinand and Terry and Cole and Neville and Scholes and Lampard and Gerrard and Michael Owen and Wayne Rooney and David Beckham. And I do think that this current generation is better. I think they're better players. I think they play at a higher level more consistently. They play in big games. And whilst you can never overlook the accomplishment of reaching the final, it never felt like we ever saw them reach their full potential. And that's the element of frustration that I'm talking about. There's no shame in losing to a team like Spain. My goodness, they have played that sort of possession-based football for quite literally generations. And they have some wonderful players coming through when you think of Nico Williams, and obviously the one that everybody is paying so much attention to is Lamine Yamal, and rightly so. But I just think there's an element of frustration that at times we couldn't get the best out of the talent that was on offer. But still, I think that said, Gareth Southgate's done a remarkable job when you consider what he inherited. His first game, we were looking at it the other day in the office, and I think Ryan Bertram was at left fullback and Jesse Lingard was on the left wing. And, you went through that team and you went, my goodness, like the group of players that have come through now, and the platform that Gareth Southgate and the environment that Southgate and his coaches have helped to create is only going to help with success in years to come. So I think Southgate can go away from his time as England manager with his head held high.
Did you ever think, like, because obviously you mentioned there, Charlie, you said you never really felt the England team reached their full potential. So I guess, did you ever really feel like we had a fair chance of beating Spain? Because for me, Spain, by far the best team in the tournament. There's no doubt about that. Obviously, it's cliche to say because they won. But even from the first game they played, I thought, wow, they'd take some beating. And I just knew within myself how England tend to play in big games. We was obviously 1-0 down, chased the game, got the equaliser, sat back. Ultimately, I felt that's how we ended up losing the game. So it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that, because for me, obviously, optimism always is high in finals, but if I'm going to be really honest, I thought our chance of winning that was very slim.
Yeah, I thought that Spain would have to have an off day, and England would have to be kind of 8s and 9s out of 10 across the board. And so when that wasn't to be, then it was always going to feel like one outcome. I agree with you. Spain were the best team in the tournament, not just because they won the thing. They beat France, they beat Germany on the way to the final. They won 7 straight games, I believe, off the top of my head. They were the best team. The one sort of element of hope that I had with England was that, if nothing else, this team had a way of finding a way. And in tournament football, where it's after the group stage, it's one game and you're through, or one game and you're out. Finding a way is possibly as important a quality as any. And so I thought that might be the only kind of saving grace for England. But ultimately, yeah, look, England weren't as good. Like, if you would go through the team, I think you'd probably and make a combined 11 out of those players. I think there would be more marginally, not by much, but marginally more England players in it than Spanish players. But it's about what you do as a team. And Spain are a better, more drilled unit who, as I say, are many, many years into this cycle of playing this style of football. And you can't forget, this is a team that won the World Cup not too long ago, won Euros not too long ago. This is it's in their culture, winning football. And it sounds like a crass thing to say, but winning isn't for everybody. Just like the Premier League isn't for everybody, neither is the Championship, neither is League One, neither is League Two. But as football fans, whenever we become engaged in something emotionally, we like to think that the highest level is for us. And sometimes winning ain't for everybody. And at the moment, it clearly ain't for England, but it is for Spain.
Yeah, you touched on Gareth Southgate and the impact he's had since coming in. Like you said, the team now compared to what he first inherited, obviously, is worlds apart. And the team back then, I think it's incredibly fair to say, wouldn't have got anywhere near the Euros final this year round. The environment has created the atmosphere. Yes, very good point. The environment has created the atmosphere around the FA, around England football has been fantastic. And he's left, I'd say, even though we've lost the final, I'd say he's left on with his head held high, with his shoulders back. Now, the big question is, who is going to be Gareth Southgate's successor? Who can kind of not only fill the boots that he's left, which are big boots to fill anyway, but then use that tactical knowledge to take England's football to the next level?
Well, my kind of fantasy appointment would be Jurgen Klopp. It's not going to happen for many reasons, I wouldn't think. But Jurgen Klopp, could you imagine that small, concentrated dose of intensity and passion? Because it would be because he's only got the players for a few days each time that they meet up. Could you imagine that small, dose of intensity injected into that squad with that ability and with his, what do you call it, heavy metal football? That would be fun. But as that's not going to happen, I think whoever does go in next has to work within the framework that the FA and Gareth Southgate have established over the last few years. I've been very fortunate. I've been to St George's Park on a number of occasions when the men's squad's there, when the women's squad's there, and when the junior squads are there. And there is a level of excellence which transcends all of those squads. It's there for every single group. So with that in mind, Lee Carsley is the current kind of favourite. He's the under-21s coach. It wouldn't be an exciting appointment for many because, well, he's the under-21s coach. But I covered the final, the under-21s final last year, in which England's under-21s beat Spain's under-21s. And I watched a lot of them through that tournament. And the way that he's got them playing would massively suit this group, I think. So I don't think Lee Carsley is as bad a shout as what everybody is making. He understands the setup. He works within that framework, and I think he'd get them playing some lovely football. The talk is he might do it on an interim. If he gets appointed as an interim, I think behind closed doors, that would actually be considered as a permanent appointment, but they'll announce it as an interim just to see how it goes. But I have immense confidence in them to get it right. And I think they will get it right. I think Lee Carsley would be a good chat, because if you're not looking at Lee Carsley, who are you looking at? You're looking at Eddie Howe. You're looking at Graham Potter. Nobody bites my hand off there. So I think stay with what you've got. You've got a good thing going. You've got a good framework going. Employ from within.
How important do you think it is to get this next one right, Charlie? Because in the end of the day, as you mentioned it, Howe, Potter, again, two good managers maybe in terms of coaching, but two managers really that haven't won anything notable, especially when they've moved on to bigger challenges. Obviously, Howe got Champions League football last season, but obviously out in the group stages, albeit a difficult group. Potter went to Chelsea, that fell through massively for him, hasn't had a job since. Obviously, you speak about Carsley there, but with this sort of generation now with England players, it's almost branded as our golden generation, and we've seen one fizzle out already with Belgium. They had all the hype, all the potential, and didn't win anything really. And obviously now the fear is that England might go the same way. So naturally, I think everyone in the nation wants to have a proven winner. Obviously they're hard to come by, but how important do you think it is now to get this next one right?
Yeah, it's obviously it's crucially important. Every appointment is important, because the last thing you also want on the other side of things is to have had all of this potential, all of this golden generation, like you rightly allude to there, and at the same time, all of this progress and momentum that they have undoubtedly built over Gareth Southgate's reign. The last thing you want is for all of that to get washed away by one bad appointment. So it has to be the right appointment. in an ideal world, you want someone who is a serial winner. But who's that? Again, you're going back to people like Klopp or Mourinho or, Pep, or, and they're appointments that aren't going to happen. So with that in mind, I think you have to employ someone that you know, someone that you trust, and that knows the system and knows the framework. Yeah, you don't obviously want all of this to go to waste, this generation here. What I would say is that the majority of them are young. You look at the best and brightest players that England have. Even if you look at the back defensively, the likes of Mark Gahey, who's come in and looked very assured. And then you go through the team. Declan Rice is young. Phil Foden's young. Jude Bellingham's 20. Cole Palmer is young. Anthony Gordon is young. Ollie Watkins is 28. You go through the team and they are young. So a lot of them are at the start of their journey. And we all want things now. That is the culture. We want things right away. We don't want them in 2, 3, 4 years' time. But there might have to be an acceptance that this group is going to be better in 4 years' time when they're all mid-20s than it is now when they're 19, 20, and 21. So they have to get the appointment right. Of course they do. And you want an established, proven winner because you hope that can then rub off onto the group of players. But these players, the vast majority of them are established winners. Jude Bellingham's just won the Champions League. Phil Foden's won, 5 Premier Leagues already, and he's still a kid. They are already a group of winners. I think they just need someone to play them to their strengths, and I'm not sure that they've had that yet. They've not had a manager with England that has managed to find a way to play them to their strengths.
Thank you very much. I think we'll kind of move on from the Euros and we'll park that one for now.
Who do you want? I'm sorry. Who do you guys want?
I mean, obviously, Klopp would be the dream appointment, wouldn't he? That'd be fantastic. Like you said, that intensity that he would bring, the energy he would bring, he'd be immense. I've always liked Eddie Howe, if I'm honest. I think I like him as a manager, and I think he would do well. But as you've said, it's not really an appointment which you go, oh my God, that's fantastic. I think it's a safe option. He's a well-known, quite liked manager within the English game already. That would probably be my safe choice, would be Eddie Howe.
Honestly, I don't want to sound greedy, but I feel like you have to at least ask the question to Pep, with it obviously being, he's been at City for a while now, and there's obviously everything has to come to an end eventually. And like you touched on there, Charlie, if you can get an interim in maybe for the next season, if Pep obviously does say, I'm having one more season at City, then we'll see what happens. I feel like that's obviously, something I would love to see. I think every Englishman would. But I just think with Howe and Potter, especially with Potter, I just think he hasn't got. He obviously has past stock, and by that I mean he has had potential where you've looked at him as a potential England manager, but in the past year and a half or so, he hasn't had a job. He's probably, arguably, you could say, waited for the England job.
He's turned a lot of jobs down. He turned Ajax down. Leicester came in for him. There's been a lot of clubs that have come in for him. So he does make you wonder, what's he waiting for? Exactly.
So that's what I do think he's probably waited for the England job, but I just don't know, because I feel like there's a lot of pressure now on the FA to get this right. Obviously, we've been in finals now twice, lost both semi-finals, lost quarter-finals, lost. I feel like, would Potter come in and change too much of what Southgate has done? Does Potter have more experience than Southgate? I wouldn't say so. So it's all just one of them. I'm just going to say Pep because I'm greedy and I really, really want Pep Guardiola into the England dugout.
Might as well dream.
Exactly.
So nothing wrong with the optimism there. Okay, so you've recently been at Wimbledon. You've been covering Wimbledon for the BBC, and that's excellent. And me and K-Ci, we had a chat about this just before we came on. We're not huge on tennis. We don't know much about it. But can you give us a flavour of what it's like at Wimbledon? Can you give us a reason why next year we need to be watching it?
It's amazing. It's iconic. I would put it up in the same sort of pantheon of great sporting tournaments as the Masters in golf, as high as the World Cup in football. It's just a great, iconic tournament. First of all, the location is unbelievable. Wimbledon's beautiful. The grounds are beautiful. The grass is that green. The strawberries are that red. The flowers are that bright and purple. And everything is completely and utterly immaculate. It's the sort of place that everybody should go at least once, particularly if you can get a ticket for either the centre court or the number 1 court, because then at least you are guaranteed to see some play. Because when it rains there, it's not a huge amount of places to shelter unless you're on centre court or number 1 with the roof on. It's beautiful. You have the best players in the world in this. It's not a big place, as in like the Wimbledon Championships, like the complex, if you will. It's not big at all. Centre court and number 1 court. I'm not a very good tennis player. I could hit a ball from one court to the other court and at least hit the outside wall. And then you've got all the other courts kind of crammed in around it. So you have this concentrated excellence. Very small area. You have some of the greatest athletes in the world. And as it's a one-on-one sport and these matches can last anywhere from 3 to 5 to 6 hours or whatever they are, you'll be hard-pressed to tell me that they're not some of the greatest athletes in the world where they can't take a point off, they can't take a possession off, they can't take a 5-minute spell where hopefully the ball don't go near them and they can just wander around for a little bit and try and stay engaged loosely. They have to be engaged from the moment they step out there to the moment that they leave. And you have, everywhere you look, you're like, oh my goodness, there's John McEnroe, there's Carlos Alcaraz, there's Novak Djokovic, there's Coco Gauff. It's just, as I say, concentrated excellence. Some of the best players in one of the most iconic locations, in the most iconic tournament in the tennising world, a couple of hours down the road from Nottingham. So I loved it. It was a wonderful experience, and I felt very, very lucky to be there.
Does it have too much difference in terms of like reporting, if that makes sense? Because obviously, football's football. The atmosphere in terms of around the places. I'd imagine a lot of difference to the tennis. Does it have any sort of weighing in terms of making an impact of difficulty, or just like what are the main differences between covering a sport like football to then going to covering like your tennis in the summer?
Well, the most important thing is being prepared for it, for starters. And because it depends on the type of match I do with football, whether it's just reports or commentary will depend on the amount of hours of research that I'll do for each match. But even if I'm just doing reports on 5 Live for a game, still 6 hours of research goes into each game, there or thereabouts. If it's a commentary, then it's probably in excess of 10 to 12 to 14 hours. And then when it comes to Wimbledon, I spent a lot of June just whenever I had a spare moment doing research to make sure that, because it's not something I cover all the time. And it was the first time I'd ever been to Wimbledon. So I must have done 40, 50 hours worth of research to prepare for Wimbledon, and I had my notebook with me and I carry it everywhere I went with me so that I was never unprepared for a moment. When you're doing the football, you're more familiar with it because it's more all-encompassing. Football's everywhere, isn't it? And if you're into your football like we all are, there's no escaping it. So some of that just drip feeds into your brain without you even realizing it. Whereas the tennis thing, it's more of a conscious effort to invest your time in watching tennis. Unfortunately, I love tennis. I love golf. So I am invested in it, and I know the game, but I want to know everything. I want to know, like, when it comes to a championship tiebreak in tennis as opposed to a regular tiebreak, and when's that going to be utilized and when's it not, and how long is the grass at Wimbledon? It's 8 millimeters if you were wondering. And it's different because football is obviously more Jack the Lad as well, not always, but it typically is, and tennis is it attracts a different audience, and you temper your tone accordingly. If something crazy happens at Wimbledon, I'm not going to jump up and down and grab Stal in the same way that I would have done at Notts County. But it's slightly just varying your tone, varying your approach, but all the while maintaining the research, because you can never be unprepared for this sort of stuff. The moment you lose your authority, and then having that kind of authority within your voice and your commentating, reporting, presentation is vital.
You could look through the week or so you were covering Wimbledon and can pin down a moment where you thought, this is fantastic. This is why I came into this sort of line of work. When would that have been for you? What was it? When you were reporting? Was it when you were watching research?
To be honest with you, it's probably the moments when I'd walk in the morning. We were fortunate BBC had hired a house about a 20-minute walk from Wimbledon itself, so in Wimbledon, but from the tennis complex. And so we'd walk through that each morning, Wimbledon Park, which is where the queue is. And so each morning you'd walk past or through anywhere from 8 to 11.5, 12,000 people in the queue. And they'd been there, some of them, for at that point, 24, 36 hours camping. And in the hope, just the hope that they could get in, and the hope that there might be a ticket available for number one or centre court once they do get in. And each morning I got to just walk in. I had my lanyard and walk in, and I just felt really lucky. I felt really lucky. The media facilities there are unbelievable, and there's a balcony where you do a lot of the interviews and the presentation from. And from there, you've got number one court to your left and centre court to your right. And as you look down, there's court number 14, 15, 16, 17. And as you look to your left, there's court number 18. And whenever you got a spare moment, you could just look and watch the tennis from that wonderful vantage point. And I felt very, very, very lucky doing that. The most surreal moment is we're out from our office down, it's not the basement, but effectively the bottom floor. You walk out, you get in the lift, you come out, and there's the balcony, and there's the view out over Wimbledon, and you can see the skyline of London in the background. And I walked out one day and I went, cool, it's busy. And then you go, oh, that's why it's busy, because Alcaraz is in that corner and Djokovic is in that corner and Katie Bolt has stood in front of me and Coco Gauff's around the corner. And you go, like all of us, that's a surreal moment when you walk out and you see those players for the first time. It's just a great experience. And as I say, I recommend if you can go to Wimbledon, go. It's a great experience.
You obviously mentioned, Charlie, that you're a massive tennis fan. So I guess my final-ish question on the whole Wimbledon thing is, like, it sounds cliche to ask because obviously, this is something you can't actually guess all the time, but where would you rank sort of that Wimbledon experience in terms of, things you've done in your career? Because obviously, I'd hope you'd say that the Wembley was,
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
No, Boreham Wood semi-final.
Oh, you know what?
I prefer that to Wembley.
I can have that. But in terms of Wimbledon, where would you sort of rank this? Obviously, as you said, massive tennis fan as well. So obviously, I'd imagine it was almost like a dream to be doing something like this. And yeah, I just want to hear how it would rank for you in terms of.
It's up there. Yeah, no, it is massively up there, K-Ci. Like, it's there's a feeling like when you're there, like that you're at that moment in time. Yeah, I know the Euros were going on, but that's kind of fragmented and dotted about all over Germany. You were in this, I'll use the word again, concentrated, in this concentrated, iconic location where the world's eyes were. All over the world as tennis fans. And so, like, the BBC's broadcast point is next to ESPN from America, and then there's two down from the top broadcaster from Italy, and then Spain, and then Australia and Japan and China. And you really felt like you were at the most iconic sporting moment in the world at that point. And like colleagues of mine will have that in the next couple of weeks or so at the Olympics, where they'll feel like, my goodness, I'm at the most iconic sporting event in the world right now. And it's not something occasionally you feel it when you do like a big Premier League game. You go, man, there's millions of people watching this from all over the world. But really, this was like a different feeling again. Like, it's right up there. There's something to be said for feeling like you are at the most iconic and important sporting event in the world at that given moment. So that was pretty special. And as I say, it's right up there as one of the best things that I've ever done in my career. And it's the sort of place that you go to and you hope you can go back every year if they love me. But I mean, yeah, like Boreham Wood at home, that's a different thing altogether. But that Boreham Wood game at home and the way it went and the moments that there's so many things in my life I don't remember. Like, so many things just kind of blend into one, and I curse myself for that all the time, particularly with my children. I got two young boys and I'm like, I wish I remembered more. And yet weirdly, I remember so much about that day against Boreham Wood. I remember what I did before. I remember where I was. I remember saying goodbye to my wife and kids and where we were at that point, McDonald's, Ed Walton. And I remember afterwards, and I just remember so much from that day. It was one of the most special days in my life.
You've kind of jumped ahead a little bit because
Sorry.
We're going to go and talk. No, it's more than fine. You're just preempting what's to come. So we're going to talk about Notts County, as I imagine is expected from us too. So what we'd like you to do, as someone who, I was in the press box with you at the semi-final against Boreham Wood. That was, like you've said, fantastic. And then you were in the press box at the playoff final as well. Can you describe that week for us from I think it was the Saturday we won against Boreham Wood and the following Sunday we won in the final, or vice versa?
Might have been Sunday Boreham Wood and then Saturday was the final. It might be the other way. I could be completely wrong here and you might be right. But for some reason I remember that I think it was Boreham Wood was a Sunday because I took my boys to gymnastics would be a stretch. It was like roll and tumble stuff for the kids at Rushcliffe School, and that's a Sunday morning. So Boreham was anyway. I digress. It was an amazing week. It was an amazing week. Like it really was. The Sunday itself, the sun shined. It was a great crowd. It was warm, and it felt like the culmination of something. Like we'd all been there through these 4 years in the National League, and we'd all gone to, great footballing outposts, but outposts nonetheless. And it felt like finally this was the year. It had to be. How could it not be, given the title race and how far Notts and Wrexham were above the next best, which was obviously Chesterfield. And so that day, as I say, was just remarkable. And like I remember being in the tunnel afterwards, and the fans were being so kind to me, and like interviewing the players, and they couldn't quite understand what they'd just accomplished. I think that was taking a while to sink in. And then I remember going back in the week, and the sun shining again because I'd scheduled to do an interview with Luke Williams, and we did it right because it was for TV. We did it right in the centre circle. You can't do that most of the time because groundsmen will. But it was just to sit there because the last home game had been played, and we sat in the centre circle, and I'd not seen Luke since. And thankfully, it's on film. They filmed the moment where Luke walked over, and I walked over to him, and he gave me a big hug. And my voice was still messed up at that point, and so was his. And yeah, it was wonderful. And we chatted about it and what an occasion it was, and then quickly turned it to Wembley, and that was nice as well because for Wembley, excuse me. Stal and me drove down together on the Friday morning, and so we were in Wembley for midday, and we had this lovely hotel. It was a nice hotel. It was a hotel that we were sharing with these weird YouTube boxers on Wembley Way, or the Olympic Way, or whatever they call it. And then our other Radio Nottingham colleagues kind of travelled separately, so like Dave Jackson and Adam Hassel and people like that. And met us down there, and me and Stal went and got Nando's, lovely romantic meal. And most of the time, to be honest with you, I spent trying to protect my voice at that point. So I was like necking ginger shots and all the sort of soothers that I possibly could, in the hope that because I'd really damaged my voice on that Sunday in how mad that we went with the celebrations for, first of all, the equaliser, and then obviously Jodie's winner. And yeah, just remember getting up on that Saturday and had to go and do a couple bits for Football Focus on Wembley Way, and getting stopped every couple of yards by Notts fans who just wanted to chat or have a picture or whatever. And I felt really special, like I felt like Stal's used to that sort of stuff, but I had like a small dose of it, and I felt, really, really special. And it was wonderful. And the voice sort of came back, sort of. And then coming back up on the Saturday after the game, and then the Sunday, my wife and the kids went for lunch in town. And at the same time, that was when the players arrived back at Meadow Lane, and the kids were like, I want to go and see it. And my wife, because she'd missed it on the Saturday at Wembley, she was like, I want to go and see it. So we went down there, and the kids got to hold the trophy. Jim O'Brien took his medal off and gave it to one of my kids to wear for a little bit, and then went and grabbed them the trophy. And which was a lovely moment, and because Jim's a dad, he gets that. So it was really kind of him to do that. So yeah, as a week goes, it was not just, I say Wimbledon was one of the best things I've ever done in my career. That week was one of my favourite weeks in my life, career or personal. It was amazing.
I just even thinking about it now just still makes you smile. But obviously, the Bournemouth game, we were 2-0 down at half time, and obviously you're on commentary at that point. You're probably thinking, anyone listening at home would be almost sort of down in their dumps thinking this is a massive blow for Notts after the season we just had. So then to do what we did, obviously we speak about the Jody equaliser, but obviously Baldwin's equaliser as well, and it's in the end of 35, I think it's 35-yard goal that he scored as well. Just three things you would have never have imagined, which is kind of why I want to ask. At half time, you must be thinking, wow, like what this could have been a massive opportunity, you know, for to have this highlight of my career. But then what panned out in that game has ultimately panned out to be that. But did you ever expect that to happen, sort of thing? You know where I'm trying to go with this?
No, yeah, well, I never looked at it like this could be a highlight of my career or anything like that. I remember being in the press room at half time, and Matthew might have been in there as well at the time. And I just remember me and Stal just being like, I won't say the first word, but it followed by Notts. You know, just like, this is so Notts to do this. You know, how can you be so brilliant all year and then this happens? And to be fair, like you look back at the end of that season, possibly after the Wrexham game, never really played particularly well again after the Wrexham game on Easter Monday. Because they didn't play well, certainly, against Boreham Wood, but somehow they pulled it out, and they certainly didn't play well against Chesterfield at Wembley, but they somehow pulled it out. Again, the stat is like they led for whatever it was, like 2 minutes of the entire semi-final and final at Wembley. If you throw them together combined, 240 plus minutes, Notts had led for like 2 of those minutes, and yet they still managed to find a way through those 2 games. So yeah, I just remember at halftime thinking, I can't believe they've done this again. I can't believe it's National League again next season. But I also kind of thought, I think Stal might have said it. He was like, get an early goal and in the second half, and things will change. And that's not exactly how it transpired, but yeah, you couldn't rule them out. Like they had a way, as mentioned earlier on with England, about how they had a way of finding a way. That Notts team had that. And I mean, I was only at Meadow Lane last week talking to Jody Jones about that goal. And people forget that he also put the cross in for the equaliser. So yeah, just a great day, and made all the more dramatic. I think if Notts had excuse me, I had a cold last week. If Notts had won that 2-0, 3-1 comfortably and just put their place at Wembley, it would have been special, but it wouldn't have been anywhere near as special as the way that we're talking about it, and we wouldn't be reflecting on it in the way that we are doing. And it certainly wouldn't have been the great week that it was personally for me either. It would have just been like, oh, that's great, off we go. That's expected. But I mean, when would it have been? 6 months later, I was covering a game, West Ham against Wolves, at the Olympic Stadium, or the London Stadium to give it its proper name. And I had Joby McAnuff as my summariser, and he chatting to this guy on and off, like before the game and then at half time and all that sort of stuff. And at full time, because we were heading the same way, I was like, I'm sure I recognise this fella. And then he introduced himself. I was like, I'm Charlie. And he went, I'm Jamal. And I was like, in my head, I went, Jamal Fifield. And that was it, like the whole. And Jamal Fifield was playing in the middle of defence. He's the big, tall, bald-headed centre half who is a massive threat in both boxes. And I said to him, I was like, what was there that day at Meadow Lane? And he was like, mate, I'm still not over that. So, you know, there's 2 sides to the coin. Like it was like, that was as wonderful as it was for us. It was rough. That was rough for Boreham Wood. And you saw what happened afterwards. You know, the next season, Boreham Wood, you know, we're nowhere near able to recreate it. And Luke Garrard, who'd been there forever, is no longer there anymore. So it goes to show how football and little moments like that can change a course of an entire, not just story, but an entire football club.
No, I know Boreham would have had quite a fall from grace really since that game, and not seem to be sort of leveraging that and are on their way up. With that in mind, what are your thoughts for the upcoming season? Obviously, Stuart Maynard's first full season in charge. We've pretty much got a full new back line compared to last season. Made a few nice signings in the midfield. How do you see Notts County getting on next season?
I think it's still a lot of unknowns, to be honest. I don't look at any of it and go, well, that'll be brilliant. Because as you say, you've got an almost entirely new back line, got a new goalkeeper. So there's an unknown. Stuart Maynard, I don't think we fully know what his fully about yet. So there's another unknown. Obviously, the loss of Maka is a big one, but I don't think anybody should begrudge him the move to the Championship. I'm thrilled that he got that move. He's at a point in his career where I think if he didn't move this summer, then he might have struggled to fit into the recruitment plans of a lot of the Championship clubs that might have come looking at him. And I don't know, under the new way of doing things, whether or not he would get the same amount of opportunities to score goals this season with Notts as he has done over the last couple of years. So I think it was an important time for him to move. And I think I don't think any of us, I would like to think, would begrudge him that move. And also, I think we're all kind of curious to actually know whether or not he can do it in the Championship. Personally, I think he will. I think he does. But we've all known him as he's been our treasure, hasn't he? He's been our little, for a time, unknown secret. I imagine Gateshead thought that far before then, and whoever else up in that neck of the woods. But we've all had that conversation for the last couple of years going, how high could he play? What could he achieve? We're about to find out. So I don't begrudge him that at all. So far as what Notts can achieve this season, I think there's a lot of unknowns. So I wouldn't want to sit here and say I think we'll finish in the playoffs, or I think we'll finish 10th or 14th or anything like that, because I just think there's so many unknowns. There's been such a turnover. There's barely anybody left now from that team, the one that we're talking about. And I know it feels like 2 seasons ago, which it was, but it's only a year ago. It's just over a year ago. Like that group, that nucleus was there, and obviously since then we've lost a lot of that. That group. You know, we could run through it, I'm sure, but like the defense is practically all gone. Adam Chickson didn't really feature a huge amount last season. The man was in and out. Jody Jones is still there. We lost Ruben. Macca's now gone. Kedwin Scott had that awful injury. What kind of player does he come back as? Matty Palmer had that awful injury and had never had a bad injury in his career prior to that. What kind of player does he come back as? How does the captain's armband fit on him? There's so much up in the air. So I can't give you this is what I think will happen this season. But I do think it'll be interesting.
100%. And, you touched on it there, Charlie, again, like, in terms of what's actually left of, not even just the playing squad, but also the staff as well from that day at Wembley, there's a massive change. And it just really ultimately shows how quick football can change, And what did you, I know obviously this is going back to last season, but when obviously Luke departed for Swansea, did you ever what did you expect at that point for Notts? Because again, like, Luke was only here for a year and a half, but the impact that he had, not only, on the club as a whole getting promoted, but it kind of felt like he properly cemented the bond between players and fans as well. And when you do that, I think that's half your battle won. And when he obviously left, you kind of ultimately think that's going to unstick. And we did see a little bit in terms of when Maynard did come in, things weren't going too well. Some started to turn, some didn't. Did you ever expect that sort of like culture change, if you like, in terms of, Luke spent a lot of the time obviously winning football games, which obviously helps, but the bond that he created between fans and players is exceptional. When it kind of fell apart, did you ever expect that sort to happen post, obviously, his departure?
It's always possible in football. There's nothing as fickle as a football fan. And not that I'm saying that the Notts fan base is fickle, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, there's nothing as fickle as a football fan. Momentum in football and that kind of bond that you spoke about there is years in the making. Luke was able to build on the platform that Ian Birchnell was able to put in place. And all of it ultimately feeds from the top down with the Reeds brothers and down into the likes of Richard Montague and the support staff in the club. Nick Richardson, Steve Carter, they do a great job of fostering that kind of relationship and bond between the group and the fans. Because, believe me, most footballers, if left to just play football, they'll just play football. So there has to be an element of the support team that are fostering that relationship all the while, and nothing fosters it better than winning. And while confidence and momentum and that bond can be years in the making, it can be very, very quick to evaporate. That's just the nature of football. We see that all the time. Now go back to the England situation. My goodness, like Gareth Southgate at times is the second coming of Sir Alf Ramsey, and then it only takes one bad performance where they might just win 1-0, and everybody calls for his head. So that doesn't surprise me in the slightest that things turned. I always felt like it would be very difficult to be the man that follows the man, and Luke was the man. It was always the thing I was conscious about when I followed Colin Slater. It was like it's going to be difficult to follow the man, and that was the case, and that has been the case with Stuart. It's difficult to follow the man, but Luke's gone. Luke's been gone. My goodness, Luke's been gone for 7 months, whatever it is now. And he's the Swansea manager, and I have a lot of time for Luke and a lot of affection for him and a lot of respect for him. And I wish him absolutely the best. And I've spoken to him since. And he looks back at that time with Notts just as fondly, if not more fondly than I do. But yeah, it's Stuart's club at the moment. It's Stuart's club right now. He's got the keys. He was able to make those changes to the backroom team, and so it's his club. He's driving it at the moment, and trust me, some wins. You have a good August. That good feeling, that bond that you spoke about, that'll feel like it's never been away. You have a bad August, things will turn even worse. He needs to get a good start to the season. That's what I would say.
I think we could all talk about Notts County pretty much forever going onwards. However, we will move it on slightly. What we would like to know is, from a personal point of view for yourself, so the sports media industry is, famously a difficult place to get into. It's a difficult place to break in. How did you first make that entrance? How did you first get into the industry?
First thing I did was I probably fired off 200-300 emails to every radio station, football club, TV station, broadcaster, not just here in England, but all over the shop. Saying, can I come in? Can I come in shadow? Can I come in and just watch how it works, how it goes? And like one person come back to me effectively, and that was Colin Fray, who's the sports editor at BBC Radio Nottingham. Everyone knows him for commentating on Forest. And he said, I got no work to offer you. He said, but you can come in and you can watch how the sports show goes out. And so I came in and watched how I wasn't based in Nottingham at the time. I travelled to be here and watched how the sport programme went out that day. And Colin sort of said, hey, it was great that you came in. There might be some paid work for you at the start of next season. This was February when I come into shadow that day. And I said, yeah, okay, well, that was all I needed. I was like, right, I need to find a reason to be in Nottingham. So I signed up for the broadcast journalism masters at Nottingham Trent Uni. So I did that, worked at Nando's. I know it's the second time they've got a shout out in this. I don't have a black card. And then kind of worked here while I did the masters and worked down the road at Gem 106, as it was then. And just started off by answering phones, making tea, editing audio, feeding scores into the ear of Colin Slater at that point, who was obviously commentating on Notts County. So who would have been the summariser back then? K-Ci. So whenever Dean Yates would talk, I could then buzz in Colin's ear and say, Man United 3, because they were good back then. Man United 3, Tottenham 1. And then he'd be able to read the score out. And that's how it started. And then just being willing and saying yes and working hard and saying yes to every shift that came, which I don't actually recommend you do. You should maintain a work balance as well. But at that time, I just said yes to every shift that came, no matter how unsociable the hours were, and just showed eagerness and readiness. And whenever an opportunity came, tried to take it with both hands and do a good job and not be, for want of a better word, a numpty. Try and be easy to work with, so that other opportunities would come. And it just developed from there by just saying yes to every shift, and eventually by finding that there's a delicate balance between badgering someone, saying give me an opportunity, and doing it too much and annoying them. But eventually he said, right, well, look, there's a game that we need full online commentary on that nobody wants to go to, and understandably why. It was the third qualifying round of the FA Cup, and Mansfield Town were at Workington. And if either of you can tell me where Workington is right now, I'd be very impressed. But basically, it's smack bang in the middle of Cumbria. So I went up there and did the game and did a good enough job that Colin was like, oh, right, we can do this more often. And I did. And next thing you know, I made the Mansfield job my own. And then obviously when Colin Slater decided to call it a day, the Notts job came my way, which was obviously like a huge thrill. And so that's how it came about. And from there, really, it's just a case of continuing with those sort of same morals that I had back then, which is say yes where you can. Changes when you got family, obviously, but say yes where you can. When you do a good job, be prepared, and try not to be a numpty. I don't know if I can swear, so I was, but don't be a numpty.
No, Charlie, look, how important do you think first impressions are in terms of sports media? Because I remember my first ever press box at Notts. It was Notts versus Yeovil National League, and I can remember walking through, like, I don't want to say behind the scenes, but like reception up to the press box, etc. I was absolutely full of nerve, and the first person that actually spoke to me was you. You asked me if I was okay, etc. And from there, it was just like, right, I feel like I am meant to be here. I don't feel like I've got this by fluke. But obviously, you didn't have to do that. But that was you sort of making a first impression onto me. And that was when I realised, okay, obviously, I knew you was a good bloke anyway. But that's when I actually had the first interaction with you. And that was your first interaction with me, really. So how important...
I knew you from Twitter.
Well, yeah, exactly. I obviously knew you as well from that part. And you was the one that I did look at and watched and try to take things from. But obviously, that first impression that you made on me was something that obviously has stuck. So how important do you think it is moving forward to just keep on making good first impressions? Because obviously, you never know where that's going to take you.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate it. I appreciate you remembering. You got to bear in mind, right? What we do is a privilege, right? And it is a privileged position. But we are not saving lives. So when you walk through and there's like a feeling of intimidation, which is completely natural, where you go, oh my God, and I know that person, and I know that person, and that guy scored a bunch of goals for Notts once. And, but there's none of us are saving lives. We're not doctors or nurses or firemen or old Bill or anything like that. We don't do anything really important. So there's absolutely no reason to get a high opinion of yourself. And I think the vast majority of people in press boxes are actually pretty decent. You always get the odd one, obviously. But I think most people, my goodness, you had John Murray on last week, and John Murray is as good of a football commentator as you are going to find. Full stop. Anyway, and he's lovely. Genial man, wonderful, genial, gentleman man. And this week, he's just come back from the Euros, and I think someone told me he was like flew home. He lives in the northeast. Dropped his bag, packed another bag, and now he's at Troon for the Open. If we could all be so lucky. But he does that by being, first of all, brilliant at his job, but by being a good man, as far as I can tell. That's a gentleman. And there is something to be said for, first impressions. You only get one chance at a first impression. But second of all, just being a decent person to work with. Nobody wants to go to work and struggle and find it difficult, and nobody, that's not what you want. You want to go to work and get on with people, because it makes everybody's life easier. And where you can also, if you can just remember how it felt trying to get in, trying to get that first opportunity, trying to just open that first door to go and answer the phones or work in the backroom team on a match day at a place like BBC Radio Nottingham. Then you should always try and remember that sort of stuff, because otherwise you forget where you came from. You forget how difficult it was to get in, and you ignore people who are just like you were 10, 15, 20 years ago. So first impressions are important, but every impression is important. People forget what you said, people forget what you do, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I think that's always worth keeping in mind. But there's a lot of good people in press boxes and stuff like that. None of us are saving lives. All of us should be aware of how privileged we are to be there. And I would like to think welcoming of anybody who's new into that environment as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's some really good advice in there, I think. And I think we're kind of closing off towards the end of our little show, which is sad. I've really enjoyed this conversation, if I'm honest. I've had a lovely time. Is there anything, and we've spoken about advice, we've spoken about tips about like you got into the industry. If you could leave us with one key bit of advice going forward, what would that be?
It's something that actually I've been thinking about recently, and it's only just kind of recently come to me. and I wish I'd known it when I was first starting out. There's a good balance to be made between getting your grounding in your craft and really recognizing that you need that grounding. You can't just walk into a 5 Live or TNT or Sky Sports and just be like, right, I'm going to go on air. You need that grounding. So that's really important. But I think there should be a fine balance between that and also knowing where you want to end up. Because often, if you know where you want to end up, getting in there relatively early is going to save you a lot of time. So if you can establish the balance between getting that grounding, getting the experience that you need at 10,000 hours or whatever they call it, but also knowing where you want to be and where you want to get to and where you want to end up, that's massively important. So if you know you want to go, and let's just use 5 Live as an example. If you know you want to go and work for 5 Live, you know what? You should probably go and work for 5 Live as soon as you possibly can, because the moment you're in the building and you can start moving up there, it's probably easier than starting at Radio Suffolk and trying to climb the ranks there, getting loads of experience, but not taking the leap quickly enough, and then almost having to start again at 5 Live, just for instance. So try and establish the balance of getting that experience, getting your grounding, getting good if you can, and then also always keeping in mind where you want to end up, because then I think that'll help to expedite the process of actually getting there. It's just the balance then. And then beyond that, yeah, like I say, always be prepared, do your research. And if you can do all of that and not be a numpty in the meantime, then great, good for you.
I feel like that's the perfect way to finish, Matthew. I don't know about you, but I feel that's a good way to end.
No, that is absolutely perfect. Is there anything else you'd like to say to us at all, or do you think we've kind of covered most bases here?
You pies.
You pies. Love it. Well, Charlie, thank you ever so much for joining us today on the Sports News Blitz podcast. And K-Ci, thank you very much for stepping in as my little guest host. I really, really appreciate the favour.
Not a problem, mate. Not a problem.
And if anybody listening is a big Notts County fan and wants to hear some more, I'd recommend looking at the Notts Talk About podcast, which are my friend K-Ci and Tom do themselves. I would give that a little listen if you'd like as well. Thank you ever so much for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time.